I used to think that the people who laughed with you were the ones who'd stand by you when life turned cruel. But life, it has a strange way of teaching you who's real and who is just clapping for your downfall. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the silence I learned to live in, and the laughter I still remember echoing in my head when I was at my weakest. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about rebirth. Before I begin, if you've ever felt alone in your struggles, or if someone ever made you feel small for simply trying, stay with me till the end. Subscribe, and let me tell you a story you'll never forget. Because sometimes the people who once laughed at your pain will one day tremble at your peace. I grew up believing friendship was sacred, that the people who called you family without sharing your blood were the ones you could trust with your soul. We were 5, me, Hira, Sana, Ikra, and Zainab. We met in college, bonded over late-night chai, failed assignments, and endless laughter. At least that's what I thought. They used to call me the soft one, the one who felt too much. I didn't know back then. That softness is the first thing the world tries to crush. While they wore confidence like armor, I wore my dreams like fragile glass. I wanted to become something, someone. But dreams cost more when you have nothing but belief to pay with. My family was struggling. My father's business had fallen apart. My mother was ill. And every day felt like walking a tightrope over emptiness. And my friends, the ones I thought would understand, began to change. It started with small things. The way they'd glance at each other when I said I couldn't join for lunch because I had to work part-time. The pitying smiles when I came to class in the same shoes for a year. The jokes that stung but were brushed off as just teasing. Poor thing, Hira once said, laughing. You're like the tragic character in a drama, all pain and no climax. And they laughed. Even I laughed, because sometimes laughing with them hurt less than crying alone. But when my father passed away, the laughter stopped, from my side at least. They came to the funeral, whispered their condolences, hugged me like they were doing charity, and then disappeared. It's funny, isn't it? How you can know someone for years, but the moment you fall, you realize they were only standing beside you because they loved the view from above. For months, I sank. My world became smaller, quieter. I stopped going to college for a while. I was tired of pretending I was okay. Until one night, I saw them again. Scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled upon a video. Hira, Sana, and Ikra laughing at a cafe, mocking someone who used to dream big but now works at a call center. I knew that laugh, that tone. They were talking about me. It was as if every bruise inside me turned visible. My hands trembled, my chest burned, but something inside me shifted. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't scream, I just went silent. Because silence, real silence, is where the fire begins to grow. I went back to work the next day, answered calls, handled angry customers, endured insults that weren't mine to bear, but every time someone yelled at me, I imagined their laughter. And it fueled me. I promised myself, one day they'll remember me. Not with pity, not with laughter, but with regret. Years passed, slowly, painfully. While they flaunted vacations and parties, I worked 2 jobs, studied at night, learned skills, applied for scholarships I never thought I'd get. And one morning, a letter arrived. A company overseas had accepted my application for a leadership training program. Full scholarship, paid accommodation. I remember holding that letter, whispering, maybe this is where I rise. And I did. The next few years changed everything. I worked harder than I ever thought possible. Traveled, grew, built something from the ashes they left behind. Until one day, the world started knowing my name. A small business project I led won an international award. My story, a girl from a broken background who turned pain into power, went viral online, and with it came the messages from them. First, it was Sana. So proud of you. We always knew you'd make it big. Then Ikra. Hey Queen, when are you back in town? Let's catch up. And finally Hira, the loudest one of them all. It's crazy how far you've come. Maybe we should collaborate sometime? I didn't reply. Not out of arrogance, but peace. Because I had nothing left to prove. And sometimes that's the sweetest victory. Not their applause, but your indifference. When I returned to my city months later, I met them by chance at a cafe. They looked the same, perfect hair, painted smiles, but something in their eyes had changed. I greeted them politely, sat for a few minutes, listened as they spoke about their lives, jobs they hated, relationships that didn't last, dreams that faded into comfort. Then Hira asked, "So, how does it feel to be famous now?" I smiled. "It feels like peace," I said softly, "but you wouldn't understand." They laughed nervously. But behind their laughter, I saw it. Fear, not of me, but of what I had become because I had owned what they feared most, my pain, my struggle, my truth. When I left that cafe, I didn't look back. I walked past the same roads where I once cried quietly, past the corners where I felt invisible, and for the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. Sometimes life doesn't give you revenge wrapped in glory. It gives you peace, so soft, so silent, that it feels like heaven, and maybe that's enough, because the girl they once mocked for dreaming too much is now the woman they whisper about, with envy and regret. You know what's strange about pain? It never leaves quietly. Even when you think you've buried it, it waits, in the corner of your heart, whispering reminders in the stillness of night. After my so-called friends laughed at me, something inside me began to decay. But something else began to grow. It was quiet at first, a thought, a spark, a single word that echoed in my mind every morning when I saw my reflection. Enough. I was done being the soft one. Done being the joke. Done being the one everyone pitied but never helped. I remember waking up one morning, staring at my cracked ceiling and realizing I couldn't wait for someone to save me anymore. No one was coming. And maybe that was a good thing, because it meant I could save myself. I started small. I applied for a night shift job at a local firm, customer service. It wasn't glamorous. It barely paid the bills, but it gave me control. It gave me a reason to get out of bed again. While others slept, I worked. While my friends partied, I learned. I saved every rupee I could. Every penny was a step closer to something bigger, though I didn't know what bigger meant yet. I was exhausted most days. My hands trembled from typing for hours. My eyes burned. My heart still ached for the people who'd left. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for validation. And then, one evening, something happened that changed everything. It was a busy Friday night. I had been handling complaints nonstop when my manager, a strict but fair woman named Mrs. Khan, called me into her office. She said, "You're different, you know that?" I remember blinking in confusion. "Different?" She smiled faintly. "Most people just do the job. Listen, you care. You turn angry customers into loyal ones. That's not normal. That's leadership. I'd never heard that word associated with me before. That single sentence. It was like someone had planted a seed in my chest. From that night, I changed everything. I stopped seeing myself as the victim of my life. I started seeing myself as its author. At work, I volunteered for extra tasks. At home, I studied free business courses online. I wrote down goals on sticky notes and stuck them to my wall, small ones at first. Buy a laptop, start a blog, apply for scholarships. And one by one, I checked them off. It took years, slow, brutal, unglamorous years. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, days I doubted everything. But in the quiet, I learned something my friends never did. Pain is the greatest teacher if you stop running from it. By the time I turned 25, I had enough saved to take a leap. I applied for a business training program overseas. I didn't think I'd get it, but fate, for once, decided I'd earned it. I still remember the day the acceptance letter arrived. It was raining outside. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. "Dear Ms. Sarah, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Global Entrepreneurship Program." I didn't read the rest. I just fell to my knees and cried. Not because I was scared, but because for the first time in years I was proud of myself. I wanted to tell someone. To share that moment. But who was left? My mother was gone. My father, too, and my friends. Well, they had long stopped calling. So, I whispered into the empty room. I did it, Papa. And somehow, I felt like he heard me. The next few years were a blur of change. I moved to another country, worked, studied, stumbled, and stood again. I made real friends, the kind who didn't measure worth by money or status. I learned about confidence, independence, and quiet power. But one night, in a small hotel room after a long seminar, I couldn't sleep. I opened Instagram, and there they were again, my old friends. They were laughing at a reunion dinner, talking about the good old days. Someone had tagged me in the comments. Remember Sarah? Whatever happened to her? Hira replied, Oh, her? She disappeared. Probably got married or something. She was never the ambitious type. And they laughed. Even after all these years, they still thought of me as the same girl they once mocked. And instead of hurting me, it made me smile. Because I had finally realized they hadn't changed. But I had. I was no longer chasing their approval. I was chasing peace, and I was catching it. Months later, after completing my program, I decided to start something of my own. A small company focused on empowering women who came from nothing. Just like I had. It started as a simple online initiative, a few workshops, some local sponsorships. But then, a magazine featured my story. From mockery to mentorship, one woman's journey from struggle to strength. And suddenly, people knew my name. I didn't chase success. I became it. And yet, deep down, I knew my story wasn't finished. Because in life, growth always circles back to where it began, and mine was about to take me back, to the very people who once laughed at my pain. It's strange how life has a way of bringing you full circle. When you think you've outrun your past, it suddenly stands in front of you, smiling, waiting to see if you've really changed. It happened on a dull Thursday evening. I had just returned from a conference. My company had been invited to speak about women's empowerment and resilience. I was tired, emotionally spent, but proud. Proud of who I had become. Then my phone rang. A familiar voice, nervous, hesitant. Hi, Sarah. It's Hira. For a moment, I froze. Her voice took me years back, to the laughter that used to cut through me like glass. She continued, You're in town, right? We're having a small get-together. Thought it would be nice if you came. For a second, I almost said no, but something inside me whispered, Go, not out of revenge, but because I wanted to face the girl I used to be, and finally say goodbye to her. When I walked into that restaurant, I could feel their eyes. It was like stepping into a memory. Same faces, older now, pretending to still be young. Hira was the first to approach. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Sarah, wow, you look different. I smiled softly. People change. The others gathered around, offering half smiles and awkward compliments. But beneath their painted faces and polite chatter, I could sense it, curiosity. Maybe even guilt. We sat, talked, or at least tried to. They asked where I had been, what I was doing now. When I told them about my company, their smiles faltered. That's amazing, Hira said, though her tone carried something brittle. I just nodded. It's been a long road. Then Aisha, the one who used to mock my clothes, my voice, my everything, laughed lightly. Remember when we used to joke that you'd never survive without us? Her words hung in the air like poison dressed as nostalgia. But instead of flinching, I smiled. Yes, I said calmly. And I guess I proved you wrong. There was silence. The kind that stretches, uncomfortable and sharp. And then something unexpected happened. Hira's eyes welled up. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. I was cruel to you, she said quietly. We all were. We thought it was funny, but I see now it wasn't. For a long moment, I just looked at her. The girl who once laughed at my pain, now breaking under her own regret. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to throw her words back at her, to make her feel the same cold loneliness she once made me feel. But instead, I just said, it's okay. You taught me something important. She frowned. What's that? That sometimes losing people is how you find yourself. Her lip trembled. She nodded slowly, and in that quiet, Something in me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. After that night, I never saw them again, and I didn't need to. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about removing the hook from your own heart. Years passed. My company grew. We helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. Women who'd been overlooked, mocked, or silenced. Every time one of them smiled again, it felt like healing the broken part of my younger self. And then one morning, as I was leaving my office, a young intern stopped me. "Ma'am," she said shyly, "I just wanted to say, your story changed my life." I smiled softly. "How so?" She hesitated. "I was bullied too. They told me I'd never make it. But when I read your story, I realized I could turn my pain into power. That's when it hit me, the full circle. What once destroyed me had now become my purpose." Later that night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights blur through tears I didn't expect to fall. They weren't tears of sadness. They were release, because the girl who once cried herself to sleep over cruel laughter had become the woman who turned mockery into movement. I realized something beautiful that night. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It sits quietly in your peace, your success, your unbothered smile, and the world notices. A few weeks later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was from Hira again. She wrote, "I saw your interview on TV today. You were incredible. I wish I had believed in you back then." I stared at her message for a long time. Then I typed back, "You didn't have to. I believed in myself." And I left it at that, because I no longer needed her validation. My life was proof enough. As I closed my phone and looked out the window, I felt a deep calm settle over me, like the final note of a song that once hurt, but now healed. For so long, I thought success was about proving people wrong, but I realized it's really about proving yourself right. They laughed when I fell, but when I rose, they fell silent. And in that silence, I found everything I'd ever been searching for: peace, power, and the woman I was always meant to be.